So you saved up, you went through the MSF course, and you're finally in a position to buy your first motorcycle. And I'm here to tell you that's pretty freaking exciting. Good on you for taking all the Dave Ramsey tips and saving up a few coins to actually go get your first bike. The next big decision is gonna be purchasing the right motorcycle for you. After thinking about the reasons why I bought my first bike, I actually came to the conclusion that getting a cruiser is gonna be the best motorcycle you can get as a first bike. So let me explain why. Now, before I keep going, I do wanna ask, if you just bought a motorcycle, tell me what you bought in the comment section below. I am really curious to hear why you bought that bike, how much you actually like it, and what you plan on getting next if you do want a secondary bike or switching it up. I would just love to hear your input overall before we keep going. Now, you can call me a little bit biased. I started off on a supermoto, now am on a cruiser, and there's gonna be a lot of upset sport bike riders from this video. Let me just preface it with that. But me standing at 5'9", I gotta pander to all my short kings out there and actually start with the seating position of cruisers. So seating position, why is it important for all the newbies out there? When you have a motorcycle that is incredibly tall, and tall for frame of reference is gonna be, I would say, anything above the 32-inch range, for all my American folks who go off inches and not millimeters, is gonna be a scenario where you're either peg-legged or you're not fully flat-footed if you are mostly torso and no legs like I am. Having a low seat height is very confidence inspiring for riders because, for very obvious reasons, you are able to flat-foot your feet, you're able to hop over the bike, and in any scenario where you maybe tip the bike over a little bit or you need to catch yourself, being flat-footed is just a much more comfortable position. I would say from my dirt biking years back in the day, there was nothing more uncomfortable than hopping on a bike that was way too tall for me. And then when you brace for any sort of position to stop or slow down or whatever it might be, not having the actual reach in your legs to touch the ground is something that is gonna almost always end up with you falling, laying your bike down, doing unfortunate things that you don't want to have to deal with or pay for. Seat height is a really key factor in why I'm pushing for cruisers. The majority of cruisers are gonna sit at about 27 to 29 inches in seat height. You wouldn't think that maybe just 3 to 5 inches makes a big deal, but size kind of does matter. So also related on the topic of seat height, we definitely have to address the fact of the seating position. So sport bikes compared to cruisers, they're going to be the antonym of each other. And what I mean by that is sport bikes, generally speaking, once you get to 600 cc's and above, you're gonna be much more hunched over. It's gonna feel like you're laying down on the tank much more than sitting in this very comfortable upright position. Now, there are naked sport bikes and things like that, but I'm going to address why I still think that cruisers make a lot more sense than a lot of naked sport bikes out there. So the seat height and the actual seating position and the comfortability of that and how confidence inspiring it is on a cruiser versus any other class of bike, that is a huge plus for cruisers, for that being your first motorcycle. It also makes sense why there's so many small cruiser class bikes at MSF courses, because they're cheap, they're reliable, and pretty maneuverable in general. Okay, now I'm gonna talk about power delivery. For the people who want to just have fun on their bike and they're not fully trying to get just the adrenaline boost that you get from speed, the power delivery of cruisers is very conducive to being a beginner motorcycle rider because it's so linear, and in a lot of cases, it's just outright slower than a lot of other bikes. As I said before in other videos, you don't want to start in a bike that's going to be too out of your league. I think that's one of the biggest mistakes that people make, is that they go to a really heavy, really powerful bike and they put themselves in a position where it's super easy to speed, it's very easy to go into corners too fast and wipe out one way or another. So for me, I think in the context of a beginner, the power delivery not being incredibly abrupt, being very linear, in a lot of ways just being a power to weight nightmare for a lot of people, that's gonna be to your advantage if you're a new rider. You don't need anything that's gonna be a rocket ship. That's something that you can definitely build up to. And if you're buying a cruiser in the first place, you're probably not doing it for top speed in the first place. Now, there are adventure bikes, there are supermotos, there are even some naked sport bikes that are gonna be a little bit slower, a little bit more tame in the middleweight to lower classes of CCs. But again, when you combine the seat height on top of the power delivery of a cruiser, that's something that I really like. You have to take the whole thing into context here. Of course, there's gonna be other bikes that are good in their own sense, but again, I digress. One of the really nice benefits as well with the power delivery being abysmal compared to something like a sport bike is the fact that the maintenance intervals are going to be really stretched out compared to other motorcycles. When you think of valve clearance checks, when you think of oil changes, something really basic like that, or any sort of serious servicing that you need to do to your bike, generally speaking on cruisers, with them being belt driven in most cases, some cases it's chain, but for the most part, belt or shaft driven, those bikes can just hammer out so many miles and you don't have to worry about the mileage. That part, again, for beginners is something that I think is a huge plus. I know that part of why I even picked my Yamaha Bolt that I have is because the maintenance intervals are so wide and I just want to have a cruiser that doesn't need constant maintenance, that's not going to be super crazy in terms of the upkeep and the intervals that we have to go through. All that stuff is kind of remedied in a lot of ways with the cruiser that I have, and it's pretty ubiquitous across all the JDM brands and even the Harley brands as well. So one key point that I do want to make is the fact that you can customize cruisers to be almost any sort of bike that you want. Now, you can't turn it into a dirt bike, of course. What I'm more so speaking about is the fact that you can change the handlebars to be very pulled back, very forward, cafe racer, all the way to huge ape hangers and everything kind of in between. I have a club style bike, so I have the T-bars, very comfortable, and you can pretty much just customize certain things, whether it's the seat, whether it's the foot pegs, whether it's the whole seating position, going from mid to forward controls. You can do a lot of different things to this platform in most cases, as long as the aftermarket supports it. Or you could even retrofit certain parts that were maybe made for a Harley and you're throwing it on your JDM bike, your cruiser. There's a lot of cool things that you could do with these motorcycles to make them even more comfortable or more aggressive depending on what you want. That's one thing that I think is also very huge for a lot of people, is that unless you're buying some decked out $30,000 Harley, you can take a lot of bikes and just make your own canvas for you to change what you want to make it your own bike, if you will, and customize it to whatever degree you really want to. And again, I understand that you could do this with other certain bikes. I know that when you think about an adventure bike or a supermoto, you can do plenty of different things to those bikes. But again, you're not going to put ape hangers on an adventure bike. You're not going to do that to a supermoto. Those are the only classes that I can really think of that would rival it in terms of the customization of the bike and what you could do to it. So there's my point. All right, now this next one is going to be for all the sport bike riders that are crying by now, and it's going to be the jump from small to large or middleweight class bikes. Now, when you do this on a cruiser, you could start all the way down to a Rebel 250, something used, and it's gonna be really affordable too. You could start with a bike that small, and that jump to a Rebel 500, to a Honda Shadow 750, to a Yamaha Bolt 942, 943cc, whatever it is. All of those are gonna be very progressive leaps. They're not gonna be this huge stretch in skill set and speed that you get from something like getting a 300cc sport bike and going to a 600cc R6 or something like that. What a lot of beginner riders don't understand is that the jump from a 300cc sport bike, even the 400, the Ninja 400, to a 600 is such a steep curve in power that you're not used to. The seating position's more aggressive. It's just insane. I don't know how else to put it other than it is going to from the kiddie pool to you're just in open water having to deal with this much crazier of a bike. And I mean, you can ride them in a more docile way, of course, but even the most disciplined riders, it's very, if you've ridden these bikes before, it's very hard to always stay incredibly safe on those bikes because they just go so fast compared to the 300cc or more beginner counterpart. My whole point is that if you start small, you can keep progressively jumping your way up, and the learning curve from a Rebel 500 to my Bolt to a heavier and heftier Harley that has, a 16 or 1700cc engine in it, it's not going to be that drastic and insane like you will get with a sport bike. It's going to be harder for you to put yourself in an unsafe position if you get used to bikes in the cruiser class versus something like a sport bike class. So we got seating position, power delivery, maintenance intervals, the level of customization, the amount of different classes that you could have within the cruiser class. The last and probably the most important thing too here is that used cruisers are not gonna be expensive at all, especially if you're not a Harley snob. You can get plenty of cheaper motorcycles. I got my first bike for $2,400. There's plenty of sport bikes out there. I had a buddy get a Gixxer 600 for, I believe it was just shy of $4,000. Not a lot of money. So there's a case to be made that you can get a lot of different types of bikes that have a good amount of value and you're not spending too much. But I will say, if you are someone looking for a brand new bike that you want to buy off the lot, cruisers have them beat, because the smaller CC engine cruisers that are out there, they do not cost a lot, just flat out. I mean, when you compare them to other bikes that are out there, it's still a lot of money, still a lot of pennies, but spending $6,500 on a Rebel 500 that you can grow into, that you can enjoy for, I'm sure, plenty of years before you step up to the next. That's really nice to have as the main sticker price versus these bikes that start at 10 grand. I mean, shoot, you could buy a CRF 450L for $10,000 before any sort of dealer markup or freight add-on or ADM, whatever it might be. The point is that as long as you're willing to go JDM first and not Harley first, you can get into one of these bikes really cheap, and I think that you're gonna have a blast and kind of scratch your head on why so many people like Harleys. So taking all these things into consideration, all those points that I made, that is why I think that the Cruiser is the quintessential best beginner bike that you could start with. The margin of error is so much wider compared to when you go to an adventure or a sport bike class and you get a bike that's way out of your league and you didn't think it was going to be that much crazier because you were only going from 500 to 1,000 cc's or 300 to 600 cc's. Those jumps are much larger. I think for all the points that I just shared, cruisers are going to be the best bang for your buck and a lot of fun in general. Let me know what you guys think in the comment section below. I would love to hear the arguments, the crying about why they're slow, heavy machines that aren't worth it. I personally love them. I think that they're just a blast. You really do get to enjoy the road. You get to go long distances and not worry about the maintenance intervals, the back pain, whatever it might be. I'll get off my high horse. I want to hear what you guys think in the comment section. I would love to hear any sort of suggestions that you guys might have, any specific content that you'd like to see. Let me know what you think, and I will catch you on the next video.